Welcome back, everybody. That was a nightmare. We don't really get a lot of nightmares like that. We don't really get a lot of nightmares like that. It's going to take me a minute here to get my act together. I had to go way back into my sessions to 2 years ago in order to get a session that would work. Somebody's up to no good. Anyway. So the show I had planned is, I'll figure it out hopefully tomorrow. So let's talk about Fukushima. We got a poll tonight. Let's do that. I don't know how that's going to play out. Should all nuclear university students work for 1 year at Fukushima nuclear meltdowns to save Earth? Oh, I think it's a great idea. Give them a taste of what life is about, right? And maybe they'll come up with solutions, because right now they only have the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society there, right? So let's talk about Fukushima while I get my act together. It's going to take me 5 or 10 minutes to absorb what I just went through. That was torture. So what you're looking at, this part right here is this whole frame is a frame for reactor 1. That's reactor 1. Reactor 2 is over there. And so these are 190 foot, 150 wide, 150 feet wide buildings. So you can see a person stood up right there. They built this contraption off site. And so that top part you see right there is the bottom part you see right here. So there's 3 more of these. Yeah, 3 more of these stacked on top of each other. They built it off site, then they assembled it around reactor 1. So reactor 1 was 100% meltdown. They done the same thing for reactor 4 and reactor 3. This is the reactor 4. Now there's the reactor building. That's the top of it right there. This contraption they put there doesn't physically touch the building. And so everything up there is empty. You're on top of that, you're above a nuclear meltdowns. So they put it on, they cleaned all this up over the 3 years with remote control cranes and everything, and the homeless. And so the top of the building is right here, what's left. So this was the same thing with reactor 3. These are just stumps that are left. So they put this contraption over it. It doesn't physically touch it, and you can see it's empty, right? When you look up to the top, it's empty. Over there, it's empty. They put the panelings on it. And then this is the official video.
Using only one wire.
Get rid of the
Therefore,
awful
even in the unlikely event that one of the wires breaks,
sounds.
cast will not.
And everything is pixelated. Let me go backwards for a second. So that's pixelated. Why would you pixelate the cast? The top of the cast, bottom of the cast, and that the crane number. And so they're claiming they're at the top of this building. Now remember, there's 70 of these reactors in the United States that are identical. So they're claiming they're lowering it down to the bottom and where it's on a truck. They're taking fuel they say out of the pool. This is 2013. And so this is what they're saying. 140 feet above this stump is what it looks like, because they put this contraption they built off site. But it doesn't work that way. And so the majority of the population have no concept of what's going on. And then they've done the same thing for reactor 3. Now remember, at the top of the buildings are the fuel pools, which have about 40 years of reactor cores. That's gone too. So putting the building, there's nothing left. You can see the debris everywhere. It's just this stump is left. They put this contraption over the stump, and then they want you to believe that now it looks like that. Even though you can see what the contraption looks like, right? The top corner up there, there's nothing there, right? There is nothing. They put panels on it, but there's nothing there. Okay, so that was reactor 4. Now reactor 3 was the same thing. There's nothing left of the building. The reactor cores and the fuel pools were at the top of the buildings. They're gone. So reactor 3, there's just this little stump left. There's no longer a 190-foot building. There's no longer a 190-foot building. And I apologize. There's nothing I can do. I got no idea what's going on. I'm assuming that they're having a go at me again. So then reactor 3. Now clearly reactor 3, it ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools out of the building. And then they put this contraption around. It doesn't physically touch the building, and you can see this contraption up there. But look at the building alongside of it. You can see the debris on the roof. Right, there is no building. It's completely gone. So they use remote control cranes and gutted it almost all the way to the floor. Just bear with me. Because it's so important to understand these facets. So important to understand the building doesn't exist. Let me find BBC. Rupert Winfield Hayes pretends he's in reactor 3 also, not just reactor 4. We're almost there, maybe. And so pretending they're in a building is it's insane, right? I'll show you the evidence, of course, but it's the very definition of insanity when they're pretending they're in a building that doesn't exist. And then how do you have a conversation with the average person? I don't know. Here we go. We got something. So the ejection of the nuclear fuel, which was the fuel pools and the reactor cores, were ejected out of the buildings. But they say they're in the building. So we're going to play this little clip, and they're all claiming they're at the top of reactor 4. Now remember, reactor 4 doesn't exist. They built a contraption But now they're going to claim that everything is hunky-dory. That's not the video, unfortunately. Just one of those nights where everything goes wrong. Common spent fuel pool. Let's see if we can pick some sense out of that. So you're looking at pictures that were released on the year of the 10th anniversary, 2021. And this is the common spent fuel pools right there. So the reactors, which are right across from the common spent fuel pool, this is backside of it, and looking that way is facing the ocean. So why was the common spent fuel pool completely pixelated out? Which is really interesting. These pictures were released from a very high quality drone. When you zoomed in, this is what was missing. And all the reactors, by the way, were redacted. So on the way, or just before you get to these tanks on the shoreline, you head towards reactor 5 and 6, is the dry storage, which is at basically sea level of all places. And the ocean washed right through it. And then as you head a little bit further north, it's reactor 5 and reactor 6. But again, here's reactor 6 is pixelated out. And the pump house and the stack. So you got reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 have melted down. Common spent fuel pool was right behind reactor 4 in the same street. That's completely pixelated out. Most likely melted down. Each of the buildings had at least 6 million pounds in it. The common spent fuel pool had double. And then there's reactor 6. Now there was also another section east that was pixelated out, and I don't have that in. I don't have that here right now. My apologies. TEPCO to abandon the Riva system. So the Riva system was the French's version of the Alps, 2014. For the last 3 years, the system was unused and kept out of operation. The Alps system has yet to function reliably in 2014. It's simply, they were building it in 2014. It was 2015 before they finished it, but you can't use it because once you put multiple Sieverts per liter through it, you can't change the filter or get back in the building. The so-called groundwater bypass operation 2014 also, it was not having an effect. It's just you can't work. You cause liquefaction on the site where the water comes to the surface. Now you can't get back on the site because you got this lethal water by the liter from gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardments, beta rays, X-rays. You can't even go near there. So if you do put a ice wall / wall, the officials admit the groundwater bypass operation was failing to reduce the tons of water from entering the crippled reactor buildings. So that was they were going to build a wall in the back of the site so the water coming down the mountainside would collect, they would pump it, and it would go directly into the ocean instead of through the site. The only way you can do that is if you got a bottom in it, right? And you can't do that. TEPCO failed to deliver on a promise to install a fence. Well, how can you build a fence? Again, you're going to cause liquefaction if it's successful. Because all these atoms, whether it's water or radiation, are all the same size. You can't filter this stuff. TEPCO's ice wall operation not meeting expectations 2014 was a tough year for lawyers. They admit that the ice wall will not stop the groundwater from entering the buildings. It's quite the contrary. It'll force the water up and cause that so-called liquefaction, where the ground also becomes unstable, but now you're talking about highly lethal water coming to the surface. and the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants don't speak the language, can barely survive there, and to do that to them is unconscionable, right? And the whole idea is to cover up everything that's going on. And so they tell so many lies, they have to tell 100 lies to cover each lie. Japan turns the live stream to fish in Fukushima safety campaign. That one probably didn't belong there, but so they were allegedly, in order to prove that everything was safe, there were grown fish, they said, in water that was filtered from the tanks. We've got pictures of them claiming they're drinking water from the tanks. It's insane. So these reactors are 19-story buildings. Think of a 19-story apartment building. And at the fuel pools, which has around 8 reactor cores, they're just as vulnerable and just as volatile as the reactor core, which is also at the top of the buildings. And so when you look at reactor 3, everything is clearly gone. When you look at reactor 4, it's clearly gone. But that didn't stop them from coming out and pretending it wasn't. Pretending to go into a nuclear meltdown in paper suits. TEPCO also claimed they burned 9,000 or 7,000 paper suits a day in their incinerators, their radioactive paper suits. They wanted you to believe that 6,000 people a day were working on the water. That's the official story. We've covered it the entire time since this has happened. When you look at the stump of the building, there's nothing left. And then they put this contraption on top of these. This is a single panel, that whole piece. That's put there with these remote control cranes. It's held there by gravity. They're very heavy. This contraption was built offsite. It doesn't physically touch the building. And you can see up there it's empty. But now that they put the contraption over the stump, which is that piece over there, they want you to believe that they're in the building. Now, why would you do that? What in almighty name would you go to that extreme for? And this is just a fraction of the media that pretended that they were at the top of the building and that everything was hunky-dory. Look at it. It's insane that they done that, right? And all they really done was put these big panels. There's a good view right there. So the average person is not able to comprehend it because they're not going to explain that this is happening, right? So this is reactor 4. That's the contraption on top of the building. There is nothing there, right? This is the top of the building right here, not up there. Again, right? The top of the building is over there, not up here. And just because they put that contraption over the building, it doesn't physically touch the building. You can't quantify that this is now, everything is normal, everything is back to normal. Abracadabra, and everything is back to normal at a nuclear meltdown. Again, when you do these comparisons, you can see what's left of the building. There is nothing left of the building. You see the thousands of people working? Pretty amazing, isn't it? So TEPCO, not sure what year this was. This is a Vaue Kafle. I'm going to play this clip for you. Hopefully that works.
And Fukushima Daiichi stage, right after the accident, it was of course the emergency condition. But right now, gradually became the decommissioning stage, more stable decommissioning stage. And that's that. As I mentioned, the successful completion of the dismantle of the spent.
All dismantled. So at the top of this building where there's nothing, like it's like Bugs Bunny, the rabbit, Wile E. Coyote. No, what was the hunter, the farmer / hunter? I can't remember his name. That's who this guy is.
And
lunatic. There's nothing funny about it, but pretend that because that part you're looking at right there. That part. So these two, reactor 3 and reactor 4 stumps, if you stack them on top of each other, they're still not as high as that. And that there's that piece is missing, that piece and the next piece above it. Those 3 chunks are still missing. And that the reactor core and the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. They're crazies, eh? They picked up 30 million one-ton bags in 2019. Like, it was 105, I think, at that time. Yeah, 105,000 sites like that. 2 years ago, though, there was other people saying there's 60 million. There's 30 million one-ton bags that we know about.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence.
So IAEA says public trust is key to projects using radioactive soil from Fukushima. 30 million one-ton bags. So they're cutting them open and growing food in them. And that the International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator, can't judge or approve Japan's soil recycling. You can't recycle nuclear waste. It's a very special night today. The International Atomic Energy Agency's chief, Rafael Grosses, told the Prime Minister shit before handing him a thick blue folder containing the final report. This was last year, 2023. Let me keep going here. I just went through a little bit of a hell trying to get this working again, right? So they built this contraption. It hangs over reactor 4. It doesn't physically touch it. And if you go up there, you'll die right away. So if a helicopter goes up and drops you down there before you get in the building, you're dead. But don't tell that to the crazies. So this was the original footage of the first few weeks of the building. They stripped it down to a stump, which is right there. They built these contraptions over it, and then the media pretended that they were in it. But there's 70 of these reactors, exact identical in every sense of the word, colors and everything, exact same engineering. Everything's exactly the same. There's 70 of those in the United States. So when you put these buildings together, this is a very dangerous precedence. And you see they put a cover over, because the building is gutted all the way to that cover. Let me move myself up there. I'm just a little bit shocked that I'm actually streaming, because I just went through hell for half an hour trying to get this show back online. And I've been at this a very long time, and I've never experienced that before. And I had to go back to 2022 with my sessions in order to get in a session that wouldn't. It's very disappointing. So clearly they're messing with me, and you see they're allegedly standing on these steel plates. You can see all the steel plates over here. First off, these paper suits can't protect you at a nuclear meltdown. Remember, this building doesn't physically touch the building, nor does it touch it up here. Clearly that's homeless, because academics are not going to stand up right there. Let me keep going here. So last year, in July the 13th, the author is a professor at the Department of Nuclear Quantum Engineering in South Korea. He said that the only thing that got out of the buildings was 2.2 grams of tritium, but don't worry about it because they're in the 1,000 tanks. Now, the 1,000 tanks were all full in 2013, according to Rupert Winfield Hayes at the BBC. Which, how do you explain 30 million one-ton bags if only 2.2 grams got out? But he said, don't worry about the destroyed buildings because everything that got out was like throwing 3 grams of sugar into the ocean. But this is a professor of quantum and nuclear engineering. And so they're not telling these lies for something to do. They moved the goalpost on August the 23rd, 24th last year. We're going to get into some headlines coming up here. Because I'm completely like I had a show set up, put a lot of work into it, and then we couldn't do the show. It was a really good show, and it's probably going to be one of my best shows this year, and now I don't have the show. I'll go copy everything and then repost it. Well, I'm going to have to work on this whole operation, the whole system. This is a pretty big system I got. It's a very expensive system on top of that. Japan's National Cancer Center says the number of patients rose by 865,000. So not everybody got health care, not everybody was diagnosed. Cancer, by the way, isn't the only illness or disease. And this is in the first year, a year after Fukushima. In North America, the Northern Hemisphere, on the ground, one study was showing 1 million atoms of xenon-133 per square meter. Another study is 20 million atoms of iodine-131 per liter. Another study is 220 million atoms of iodine-129. So that's just 3 studies showing you numbers we've never even imagined. There's no books, science fiction included, fantasy books or anything else that has these particular attributes into it. This is an unprecedented nightmare. Another study right away from the French government was 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet every second for 300 years, up to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. So you had 1 million atoms of xenon-133, you had 20 million atoms of iodine-131, you had 220 million atoms of iodine-129, and you had 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. So there's much, much more than that going on, but that's what they acknowledged. And 30 million one-ton bags, and they're growing food right alongside the one-ton bags of radiation. So, like, they're telling us. That's not the one right now. So, I mean, these people they're telling us that it's like throwing 3 grams of sugar into the ocean. This was a plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. So we're going to jump into some headlines to help articulate the insanity, the madness of what's really going on. I actually got 7, 8, 9 hours of work I got to do tomorrow to try to resolve this and get everything back to where it's. I got to load up 10, 15,000 pieces of information tomorrow on top of that, so I can get all my information back where I can find it. So I got a nutty day tomorrow. I got a horrible freaking day tomorrow, to say the least. And so tonight we're just going to try to footloose our way through a show. So let's talk about some headlines for a few minutes. Let me bring in hopefully some. It's absurd that I'm having to do this tonight. That's okay though. I just got to bring in some junk. Bear with me. Well, my foot's gone to sleep from all the madness. You can call into these shows. I'll put up a number for you in a little minute. Take some pressure off me. Let somebody else do some talking for a change. Or yelling, whatever. Come on, Dana. I got to bring in some AI pictures for a bit of a few hoots. The crazy world of nuclear scientists. There we go. Because in this particular session, I have none of my AI pictures. So we got that already. This system is working good. Which look like this, right? The nuclear scientists are our worst enemies. Okay, so let's go through some headlines. Because we got to kill some time. I can't do the story, the incredible amount of evidence that I had put together for tonight. So we got to do something else. All right, so International Atomic Energy Agency today admitted there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, and that the standards are based on benefit, not safety. So there is no benefit to radiation, anthropogenic man-made radiation. If you get a single atom in your body, oh, we got James calling in. Hi, James.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you. James Luce's calling in, folks.
I'm just upset. I'm really upset about last night. The nerve to calm down, Charlie, to even bother to call you.
Yeah, no kidding, man.
At this point, and it's not like, I tried to just do everything I can to get his attention. He didn't even mess with it.
That's awesome.
And it's like Craig too. Like I've done tracks about Craig, like gangster rap with like vulgar lyrics and everything.
Awesome stuff. It's awesome, man. I love it.
And I know Craig had to watch it because
he's a piece of shit, and he'll do it too, right?
Down.
Yeah.
Like there was a thumbs down. I'm like, well, that had to have been Craig, but he didn't leave a comment.
Yeah. That's Craig.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, you know what? Here's Craig and Calm Down Charlie harassing Dana and Kevin. They, like Craig's screen name is something like Debunk Dana Durnford and Kevin. Like literally, that's his screen name.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
YouTube allows that.
Yeah.
Like they were like all hardcore about bullying online, like. You have to watch what you say now on YouTube. Like you'll get arrested if you say something fucked up.
Yeah, that's right.
Like they'll come over and they'll just take you to jail.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy now what censorship is like. And
well,
go ahead.
To get away with it by harassing you, that's the whole thing. It's like, how is this possible?
I've complained about his site no less than a dozen times. Officially complained about it. I screen captured everything, and he's still going strong. And he's very dangerous what he's doing. He's got thousands and thousands of comments. He acknowledges that. Go ahead, James.
Well, I guess I kind of did some kind of trigonometry on the solution here and realized that. Here I am, talking total shit to them, and these AI totally aim for them to, come after me, and they don't.
Yeah, no kidding.
But
you're challenging them.
That means they're not being paid to screw with them. They're just actors.
Yeah, that's
obviously.
True. Yeah.
They're just paid to go after you.
And Kevin, yeah, they're what is it? Dana Durnford and Kevin Blanche Debunked or something. That's the name of one of his sites. And then Forbidden TV is his other one or something. And he'll come in on the same channel and he'll argue with himself with those two accounts. It's the same person, right? In order to get people's attention. Yeah. But he's acknowledged that he's, I've seen in one of his comments to you actually where he said, I put out thousands and thousands and thousands of comments and nobody's been able to prove me wrong. And I was like, wow, acknowledging it. Way to go, Craig. But like,
I've tried to I made him look so stupid, and what he does, he just deletes the comment, so the whole thing just disappears. And I've kept screenshots. The guy's a complete idiot. He's such an idiot. I feel bad for the guy.
He grew up in a prepper's house out in the middle of nowhere.
Something still insidious about the man.
He's been living. He's been living in a van for a decade or something, and he travels all kinds of nuclear sites. But he also does all kinds of gun shows and prepper shows and stuff like that, where he brings in material and sells it, right? And
Right.
he had pallet loads of Geiger counters he was selling at one point from his website.
Well, like he was blaming you. He's like, damn it, Dana. Like, you have no idea, like, how many people come to my booth now asking me questions because they've watched you and all this. Think about the logic in that. Like, wouldn't you be thinking, Dana, for all these people coming to you, buying Geiger? I mean, come on. I mean, the guy, the reverse logic that he's expelled, it makes zero sense. And
he's active, Don. He's on
argument about like how nuclear plants need external power to operate. He's like, I need external power for my hydro plant. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, he's talking about the excitation voltage for a meat. It's like the ridiculous argument. He's out of scope. So you try to. I
wondered if Craig might be leasing out his account to the industry, right? Because there is a lot of comments that are really confusion that is way out of Craig's league. And we know, because Craig's done interviews, and I've documented everything, and I've been studying him for a long time like a little lab rat. And I'm assuming that's what he's done. I know he likes to go to nuclear power plants. I don't know what the connection is, but I know he visits all kinds of nuclear power plants. I guess he's looking for, is there anybody you want me to pick on kind of personality, right? This seems to be one of his things, I guess. I don't know. He's put a lot of work into it.
Well, if you think about the reach and the budget of the PR machine of the nuclear industry, it's got to be in the billions, right?
It is, yeah. A year, every year.
And so that's,
he found a little niche. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we just want some people on YouTube causing a fuss. We don't want, and get them 1,000 subscribers or whatever. Make them look legit. and here's Craig doing these videos about civil defense. I mean, there literally is a video of him. He didn't go full on to this, but he was like, yeah, the treated water that they're releasing, it's kind of safe to drink. Like, he didn't go full on that it's safe to drink. Like, he hesitated there. But, I mean, it's like, that's a criminal offense, in my opinion. Say something like
it's absurd. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
It's just ridiculous. Like, why would you have anyone out there suggesting anything like this could be ever safe to drink?
I hit him with the 30 million one-ton bags quite a few years ago, and he just basically wouldn't come back after that. He was throwing all kinds of garbage my way, and I was like, if there's no radioactive fallout, how come they picked up 30 million one-ton bags? And I linked to the story. You were able to put links in there at that time, and they were staying.
I mean, he said to me, like, why don't you get Dana to let me debate him on his show? Like, hey, you have no idea. Dana, you're so outclassed from Dana. Dana is out there on it's like you're just you're just a complete idiot.
Well, I'll debate him. There's no doubt about it. He's not going to, though, right?
Behind all this,
He's not going
the
to.
beauty is AI understands who you are, what you've done, like literally. Like
It's learning.
the expeditions you've gone on all those tiny little islands on the West Coast.
It's absurd. It's absurd, isn't it? Yeah.
It understands how that area really is a sanctuary. It was at one time.
Yeah, that's right. It's just so heartbreaking, the whole story.
Who else has done that? No one's done any documentation on that.
And I provided GPSs of everywhere I went, right?
It's so, and it can't erase it. It can't be removed. It's in the permanent record, and it's like that's the thing. Like they better be really freaking out because they can't hide the truth for much longer because again, it's only going to get crazier. I mean, imagine the full-length videos that we're going to be able to make of all the situations that we know about. I mean, it's breathtaking what's going to be possible soon, so we don't all die from nuclear.
You know, I've thought about that too. You know how because I'm using AI a lot more now, right? And I'm saying to myself, oh my goodness, right? At some point, I'll be able to just tell my system to make me 10,000 pictures of one-ton bags and everything else, because there's 150,000 pictures missing of the 150,000 sites there used to be.
I think
it's just going to go ahead and do it.
If you can jot down the experiences that you were going through alone on your vessel.
It was madness.
In the middle of the night.
It was madness.
That's the kind of stuff that would just be
Yeah.
Amazing to see. In your eyes.
That's coming.
Yeah.
That stuff is definitely coming, right? It's when I went and done those expeditions for 6 years, that damaged me, right? That, you know, not finding nothing, but you had to document it to see if the species came back. And the species didn't come back, so which meant now you're forced to constantly keep going year after year, and I'll try to bring up some pictures to see if the species come back. And that's what redoing the research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska was all about, was to find out if the species to your left, folks, came back, and they didn't. And what that meant was we have to go back year after year to see if there's any kind of recovery at all. And if there's no recovery, what it means is the ocean was broken, because no ocean was normally a soup of life. And so what James Lucid is referring to there is the most frightening imaginable story. This is why they hate me so much, I would imagine. It's because I represent the reality of what happened. And, you know, like they're pretending they're on top of a building that don't exist because all the species are gone. Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
The thing is that the heart and soul in all of this as well is that they thought they had it in the bag. They're not going to authorize any research vessels to go do their own research.
No.
That's off the board. Who else is going to do it? No one's going to do it on their own. It's too risky. No one would dare to go out there on their own and do the research. And here you are, you did it. You're like the one guy that they're like, oh shit.
They never seen it coming. They never see me coming, I don't think. I think what really happened was they just didn't realize that I was capable, right? Because what they didn't realize was I was an ex-commercial diver who had actually dove that whole coastline for a decade, and the Atlantic Ocean, and so I was incredibly capable. And I chose a boat that was unsinkable because I had to go into a rock pile. There's 27,000 islands, and you got to go into a rock pile where there's around 3 million rocks waiting to sink you. And so I needed something that could withstand the beating I was going to take. And something that the boat I'm using is an ex-Coast Guard boat. and it's designed to go and pick people up off rocks after their boat sinks. So it was a very appropriate machine to use to do the dangerous work that I was doing. It was very dangerous, very risky to go into the places I went into. And people don't realize it. And someday, if they didn't take down my other site, we had all of that already documented. Right, all those research expeditions were up on my other site. And when I was out looking for spiders 3 years ago, they took that site down. And they disappeared around 1,800 presentations and the research expeditions themselves. But they didn't take the vinegar out of me. They didn't take the passion. Because this is a calling. It really is a calling. I was meant to do this. It's clear that the education I had, the experience I have behind me, everything was about having the ability to go do the things I'm doing, and then to challenge the industry. I realized I was going to have to go public, and I knew that if the minute I went public with my name, that they were going to go after me hard. But what they didn't realize was that's fuel for Dana.
Right.
That really is fuel for me.
Well, I mean,
I don't mind it, right? It's fine. Let's bring it on, right? And
it shows their desperation to do everything they can to hoodwink the world. They're like, Dana's too bright. I mean, even though we got all this censorship on them, like you still can't ignore the fact that this is this is the truth.
Oh yeah, man. And the way I put it together, I can tell the story pretty quick now, right? With pictures. Because
it's like that's I sent that article to you before the show and everything, just to throw that out real quick. That here's NPR running a story.
It was crazy. That's a crazy story. That's a crazy story, man.
But that just shows the complacency of them. I mean, of course we
and
understand.
They've been around for 50 years. They celebrated their 50th birthday. And I was like, oh my God, right? The secret special response team. Nobody can respond to a nuclear accident. That's the problem with it. Is you don't respond to it because you don't have the equipment, the ability to shield yourself from it. You can't respond to it. 50 years of it's. And
they got a special helicopter paint job.
Yeah, well,
it's all optic.
It's all optic. Like the story is. I'll probably cover that tomorrow night. By the way, that story because it's pretty funny actually, right?
This is the comedy show, right? How do you get to the fact that here they're trying to sell us that these off-duty scientists, regulators, these people that are they're taking time off of work to go train and respond to nuclear crises. Like it's like. Why aren't you at Fukushima then?
Yeah, no kidding, man. Great, yeah. I'd like to know what ones they responded to. I really would, right? What actually did they respond to? Oh, that's right, nothing. Like I've been.
But there's these bureaucrats moonlighting to save us from a nuclear disaster. That's what they're trying to sell the public. It's a good thing.
I blew up laughing when I started reading the story, right? I was like, oh, this is ridiculous.
I just can't get over it. But I guess it's just we have to have this conversation, right? It's the only thing that breaks it up. I mean,
I've been at this a long time, right? 22 years. And I've covered everything under the sun. For many, just it's absurd how much I've covered over the years. And if I was given, say the federal government of Canada or wherever said, Dana, we're going to put you in charge and you're going to go deal with it. And I'd be like, what are you, nuts? How are you going to deal with it? I'm not going to use the homeless. I'm not going to be using the homeless. I'm going to demand we use nuclear scientists. And you're going to see them all retire. Every one of them will retire the next day, right? Oh, Durnford's not getting me. I'm not going in there. They won't go there. They're not going there. And
well, it was just like the guy they hired to be the head of the U.S. spent fuel program, and they just kept getting arrested for stealing women's luggage at the airport. I mean, they gave him a free pass the first time. They're like, "Look, don't do it again." They did it three times.
I'll give him credit, but he had good taste, right? But they hired him because he was the least likely, and he was a nuclear academic. On top of that, he was a nuclear engineer.
Oh, yeah.
He was lost. He was a lost case. He was a basket case. Very smart. But I'll never understand how and why they done that one. That was the strangest experience.
Well, what is it? How do you gauge someone who's smart in nuclear energy? Do they just have to memorize all the decay chains? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Like they can just tell you right off the bat? I mean, really? I just don't understand.
Well, if they're going to come out and say it's like a banana and a potato chip and walk in the sunshine, they're going to get that job, right? If they're going to go out and tell that to the masses, and they're like, he wasn't presentable. The guy they had in charge of nuclear waste, he really wasn't presentable as a public figure. And we talk about this a lot, where the nuclear industry really doesn't have anybody that people can relate to, and so they try to use names like Bill Gates, and which is a lunatic, right?
They're like, oh yeah, let's get it transgender. That's gonna work in our image.
That's.
That's what they'll go. So I'm sure they have conference meetings after this. So how can we deflect? Oh, we're gonna put money into this program. We'll put money.
He implemented nothing. He stole all. He was making a fortune. He was making a fortune, and he still couldn't help but steal women's underwear at the airports. Where there's cameras everywhere. Like he sabotaged him. He had the best job on. He had the best job on the planet. All he had to do was just continue to tell lies, and they would let him. Right. He had credit cards, the government credit cards. He had 1,000 people at his beck and call. He was the highest level of security. He was a golden child, right? And then he was a flamer.
Imagine, the nightmare his supervision had to deal with. They're like, oh, we don't want to come across like we're bigoted by firing him, but we don't have a choice.
Thank God he was out there stealing women's underwear. That's all I can say. We're really lucky.
More of a problem for us.
We dodged a meteorite by him stealing women's underwear. Like we did.
Yeah, it was bizarre just how they let him go, and he danced into the sun.
Oh yeah, no, like you said, they let him get away with one, they let him get away with another one, then he got away with another one, and then the third time he was like, well, man, we got no choice, we can't
tolerate this anymore. We just can't.
They're like, it happens. It was an accident, right? He didn't bring it back. He wore it, right? And I still have nightmares. I still have nightmares thinking about him. And I don't know who they got there now. I don't know, right? I'm afraid to look anymore. All we know is.
Anyway, let me let you go, but yeah.
I appreciate that. That was great.
I'm gonna do it. My next track is gonna be about this next team, this elite nuclear response team, and everything's all dialed into this, so it's gonna be really fun.
Get their names and put them in the tags, right? Tag them.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Okay, James, appreciate this, man. Loves you, buddy. You take care, man. That was awesome. I'm glad you called, bud. Thank you. That was James Lucid, everybody. James is in the comment section. He's been around a long time. He's more than that. He's a huge supporter. Now for the last long time now, he's producing anti-nuclear music with AI, and it's fantastic. And I don't think we're going to be able to play our regular song tonight, which is going to kill me. Because I love that song, that Calm Down Charlie song. Let me see if I can go and import it so that at least I got it sitting there when the show is over. But yet, I struggled for half an hour to get back online. Now, I've been doing this for a very long time, 5 days a week. It's very unusual for me to struggle. It's very, very, very unusual for me to struggle. And we certainly struggled tonight, my goodness. And let me just see if I can find his songs. And it's got so many great songs, right? There's lots of them I could play, but there's one in particular that we really get a great charge out of. Yeah, the motion. Did we cover the poll tonight? We got no items match. Is that in my passport section, I wonder? Let me try that. Yeah, that's where it's I found it. I'm just going to have to play a few seconds of it. Just bear with me. No, that's not it. The next one must be it. Just so that after the show, at least we get our regular song. Everything else got screwed up. That's the guy who called in last night. We played this song, Calm Down Charlie. James Lucid made this one.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana.
And so Calm Down Charlie is a troll, been trolling us for a decade. And he's always suggesting, when he calls in, when we let him talk, that there was no adverse side effects whatsoever from Fukushima. Now, the research expeditions I took clearly shows a catastrophic extinction level event. And Tokyo newspaper, 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. And don't look like I'm recording my show, even though my video, it says recording. I got all zeros. Just tortured me. Nuclear industry loves torturing me. That's all they can do, right? They can't tell the truth. They can't call in and have a debate. We gave them oodles and oodles of opportunities to call in. Craig, there's another thing too. Craig has never called us, have he? Has Craig ever called into the show? No. And my phone number is typically at the beginning of every show. Oops, I don't know if it was there tonight or not. So 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. This is a catastrophic number we're talking about. The head of Tokyo area medical clinic says we're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima radiation. James called work though, because I was off my game, and so James called in and it broke that paradigm for me. Now I'm back, baby. I'm back in the game again. But I was completely confused of what they had done to me and how I was going to get around it, get the show back up and running tonight. Radiation health specialist, children over 11 atoms a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. And so you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So how is a parent going to perceive 11 atoms a kilogram? How does that actually work? So there was so much radiation that the food was banned in 55 countries, or 14 prefectures by 55 countries. And Canada, of course, is not a country, it's a nuclear entity. So Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. So Japan couldn't ship it anywhere, the radioactive food, basically only Canada. And so everybody in Canada is sick because of this. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137. These numbers are so tiny now because of the perpetual emissions, it's impossible to avoid these types of numbers. So it's much worse when it comes to insects and birds and small mammals and animals and large animals too. All 8 million species now are destroyed. Their genetics, their DNA, their chromosomes now are permanently altered. And the repercussions are basically an extinction event. And it takes a few decades to play out, and we are well underway, right? Fukushima was a pulse event. It was equal to about 36 large reactors melting down at the one time, and most likely a lot more, particularly when you think about the significance of the mixed oxide fuel, the MOX fuel. And when you appreciate that, and the reason this tiny fraction is so damaging is because anthropogenic man-made radiation is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So a single atom, try wrapping your mind around that statement, can cause you a cancer, for instance, eventually. When it gets in your body, it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, your bones. Your body attacks it now for the rest of your life. Every second, it pulses energy like an explosion. And if it's cesium, it'll pulse 600 feet. It's going to wreck your chromosomes, your DNA, and your cells by the millions. Your body is going to try to repair every one of those cells and chromosomes and DNA. It can't. And at the same time, because this happens every second, at the same time it's going to try to contain the source, which is the physical atom. And it's not a millisievert, it's not the microsievert, it's radioactive fallout is in physical atoms, and the decays are called a Becquerel, a BQ abbreviation. And so the body, as you bioaccumulate more and more, it has all of these explosions going off in the body. The body has to repair all the damage every second and attack the source. And what it does with the white blood cells, because you're creating more and more white blood cells now, which is displacing red blood cells that carries oxygen and nutrition. And that makes you more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. And at the same time, now your immune system is compromised. So even the flu could cause you significant harm, could kill vulnerable people because your immune system is compromised. And it's going to do that every second for the rest of your life. This stuff never stops pulsing energy. And because there's so much of it, another study in Japan, and this is not just isolated to Japan by any shape or forms. 13,646 children have thyroid tumors out of 38,000. It used to be 1 in a million. So this is Dr. Helen Caldicott. Dr. Helen Caldicott was asked, does the building look like that or does it look like that? Now, she's done this interview hundreds of times where she says it looks like that. And these people interviewed her, and they're the only ones I know that done this, challenged her. So I put these pictures to you left and right, and she's adamant it looks like that, but you got to hear it from her. Now, she wrote 14 anti-nuclear books. She's a doctor. She's completely aware of the difference, and she is the one that most people will be led to by the nose when they first start looking at Fukushima, and her and Arnie Gunnarsson.
Let me ask you this. You said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Do you think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
So the building can't look pristine. It doesn't work that way. Arnie Gunnarsson was really interesting. You see Fear Winds. Now, this video is going to back away. It's Reactor 4. And he's going to talk about Reactor 4. But Reactor 4 is in the same place as where his video is.
The Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago, and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
He made the assemblies for the fuel pool, or the racks for the fuel assemblies, which were at the very top of the building. And so when he was making the statement, right, you see where the video is to up there? Well, that's where the fuel pool is in the building to your left. There is no building left. That's Reactor 4 at Japan. And this wasn't the show we were supposed to have tonight. My apologies. There was James Lucy called in. He was talking about the funded studies. There actually was a funded study by Loveless Respiratory Research Institute. And the effects of the radiation exposure in Hawaii, they said, was going to be beneficial. So the plume covers the whole planet, and they roll out Dr. Raymond Gilmedi from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico. And they say that will activate natural protective processes in humans. Hormetic effects, which is beneficial. There is no beneficial anthropogenic man-made radiation. That's why we have terrorist laws, right? That's why we have terrorist laws. And this is why there was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. That's why the food was banned from 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade. That's why 6 in 10 children have diabetes, because there is no beneficial. 45% of the kids in Fukushima survey had thyroid exposures to radiation, up to 50,000 microsieverts per year, equivalent for a 1-year-old. So this is why you see 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. By the way, not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. Cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury. What's going to be really interesting is did the video record tonight, because it's still like red for recording, but there's no numbers. I've never seen that before. Scientists, the very lowest levels of radiation are harmful to life, and we got to rethink our exposures levels from nuclear plants. South Carolina, well, Carolina right now is a nightmare after the 2 hurricanes just went through there in a row at unconscionable, unprecedented speeds. Celebrated physician, Fukushima has humanity on the brink of a possible worldwide nuclear holocaust, and the world as we know it has effectively changed, and the effects on your health are incomprehensible. To the average person maybe, but not to us. It has been covering this for a very long time. This is a plume model based on TEPCO's total release, which is simply refusing to acknowledge the reactors melted down, for goodness sakes. This was based on 20 days to your left. Neptunium-239, which decays to plutonium, by the way, it's a nasty isotope, and it decays to plutonium-238. France says Japan's lost control of French to leave the country. That was right away, March the 16th. Well, all the reactors had blown up by March the 16th, at least once. There was more explosions. Top cancer doctor, there was descending voices too. Originally, for the first number of years, they slowly disappeared. I'm sure they were replaced, ostracized, fired. Nuclear radiation, most carcinogenic thing that exists. It's not like a banana. So why would you grow food right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation in the middle of a nuclear wasteland when nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists? Radioactive fallout. A single atom, right? And they acknowledge that. And it not only causes cancer, there's heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. So here's Helen Caldicott, again, right, coming out as the good person. Disinformation by nuclear proponents try to confuse the public about the effects of the external, internal. So, but at the same time, she's saying that the building doesn't look like that. The building looks perfect. And so how could she be that naive? The officials raised the radiation levels for the victims to get iodine pills after the meltdowns 75 times higher than the batshit lunatics have recommended for children. Excuse the language there. And this is the crazies at the Wall Street Journal on top of that. And scumbag Gunnarsson, who told you the fuel pools were still there, come out, and now the media has already reported the NRC wants radiation exposure is 100 times higher than the EPA. So why was he injected into that conversation? Which was an attempt to give him street creds, right? So Korea called Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. Well, I think it's genocide. It was on purpose. They refused to even try to stop it. But what are you going to do? I often think if I was in that position, like what Russia done, they just went out and jacked people off the streets with machine guns and buses. So get out there for 25 seconds. And a lot of them got a tiny pension to keep them alive, basically. But that was the only option, and didn't work, of course. And let me just play that clip, because that's an important clip. It was from a documentary. It usually shows up pretty quick for me. Yeah, there's one. Already voted that one? Let me try this again. The problem is once I type in something sometimes it'll throw the entire book at me. I just got to, because I got a lot of green screen helicopters too, right? Oh, here we go. Look at that one. Okay, let's keep going then. I'm going to play that clip from the documentary about Chernobyl. All 600 helicopter pilots died, by the way. I got to put my headphones on just so I can double check the volume for everybody.
It was heroism.
During this operation, 600 pilots are fatally contaminated with radiation. All of them will die. But their efforts only buy a few days. Although it has been covered over, the fire still isn't out.
That's the most insane video conceivable. Kicking a glass so he can put his Geiger counter out there. He doesn't know what he's doing, right? Otherwise, you could never get him there. The whole industry, its entire legacy is insane. It's a threat. It's the biggest threat to humanity and the species is the radioactive fallout from nuclear power plants. And all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms on top of that worldwide. Nuclear report, this is TV, warns of an apocalyptic scenario at the Fukushima in the weeks ahead. And this could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. So the reason they would invoke the world and the planet is because the radioactive fallout, this model over there is 26 days, covering the entire planet in radioactive fallout after 26 days. Another story, Japan Times on top of that. As the public, who today says it never even melted down, by the way, Japan Times, as the public possibly worldwide sickens over time, the truth will, no pun intended, leak out about Fukushima. Nobel Prize winner, the only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. And this was NHK, by the way, which is now saying that there is no nuclear meltdowns as of August the 24th last year. And the truth must be told, Fukushima is a major global threat to all living flora and fauna. And every time I see Ernie Gunnarsson, how do you ignore the lies that he told, see? Because you got to get street creds, so you got to come out and tell a bit of truth, right? 70% of the children are contaminated with radioactive cesium. All of them contaminated with plutonium and uranium, americium, neptunium. And the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes, which you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. And these headlines are what I call the horror headlines, because this is the best education you'll ever get is these types of headlines. These are undeniable. Over 1 million Japanese still living in, now they're talking about in the Fukushima prefecture, in just one area in particular, because Japan is a nuclear wasteland, right? It's the whole country should be abandoned, with high daily radiation exposures, and that the previous limits was 0.1 atom a kilogram. Now it's 1,000 times higher. It's much higher than that. They're not checking. They say they are, but they simply can't, because otherwise you can't consume any food whatsoever. Why would you put an industry that has those particular attributes anywhere on your planet? And why are they all surrounded by farms? And realize how much power and influence and how many, I try to remind people how far down the hole we actually are, how late it is. They got 80 years on us. 80 years of getting away with it. They're still getting away with it today. But we showed up, and we're not going to be driven away. We're not going anywhere. We're here to make sure that the world realizes every single day that this story is still happening, that this is pertinent, and this is unacceptable, and it's catastrophic, and that we got no options. We gotta get lock horns with this industry. And this industry doesn't have a wall to lean on. The minute that you confront them, they're going to be on their back foot the whole time. They can't stand their ground because they don't have a moral high ground to stand on. The entire legacy of this history is just completely unbelievable. Generation after generation, administrations after administration has come out and regurgitated the same lies for 80 years, and they've dug the entire planet into a pit that we might never be able to crawl out of. Think about the statement that the country will be evacuated if number 4 fuel pool collapses. The entire country should be evacuated if the number 4 reactor collapsed. The entire country. A country. An entire country if the building collapsed. Well, it collapsed clearly. When you look at Tokyo, 29 million atoms per square meter. But why would you have this technology where if it breaks down, you have to evacuate your country? Your country. Naoto Kan, who was the prime minister at that time, said he was this far away from evacuating Tokyo if this building had a collapse. If the building looked like that right there, they were going to have to evacuate Tokyo, 36 million people. But look at the building. The building did collapse. And we know that because when you look at Tokyo, 29 million atoms, this is just one type of isotope they're acknowledging. It simply can't, radiation doesn't fall out by the single isotopes. The single chemical, right? It's all of them. Very high concentrations of hot particles, including plutonium and americium. Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Caldicott, see? But they're the deniers. They deny that the fuel pool is gone in this one. They deny that the fuel pool is gone in number 3. The top of the reactor 3 is gone, right? The 3 top parts of a 190-foot, 19-story, 65-meter building are gone. Here's Helen Caldicott on reactor 3. Now, I put the pictures there. And then I'm going to, just for badness, I'm going to play her statement on reactor 4 too. Because they're both at the same time. And this particular interview was Talking Stick TV, who I actually have a lot of respect for. And she done this hundreds of times, and I decided, I'd call her many times, but I was going to call her on this one. Listen, I'm going to adjust the volume if necessary.
And especially building 3 is very fragile. It's still got a huge cooling pool on its roof, protected by nothing.
So it's still got a cooling pool, I'll replay that, on the roof, protected by nothing. There's no roof, right? And it ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools out of the buildings. This video was available on day 6.
And especially building 3 is very fragile. It's still got a huge cooling pool on its roof, protected by nothing. The molten core has melted its way down onto the concrete of the containment vessel, but maybe into the earth. And if that collapsed, there would be a nuclear inferno.
Now, she tells the same lie for reactor 4.
Building 4 is also similarly fragile, and it's got a huge cooling pool on top with all its fuel rods, but they have been removing them. And it's been a very delicate procedure, and they've removed almost all. So if that collapsed now, I think it would probably be okay.
This is madness that she's one of the biggest public speakers, got 14 anti-nuclear books, and she's pro-nuclear. She's putting out over and over and over and over and over that documentation that they got the fuel out of the pools. Like, we can't have a future with people like this doing that. There was also another study of 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs per cubic meter detected in the California area. There was similar studies on the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs from different institutions, by the way. So it wasn't just a single... All of these weren't single studies, by the way. Radiation forecast in Japan was kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. Fukushima release was so great that the radioactive aerosols in Washington were up to 100,000 times normal. It was actually 450,000 times revised. So this is September 10, 2011. This is June the 7th, 2012. And both of them are the Xenon 133 studies. And this was 450,000 times above detection levels now and persisted for weeks. Well, it was an entire plume covering the entire planet. It was a continuous plume covering the entire planet. This is the Xenon plume covering the planet based on 19.5 days right here. Authorities hid the radioactive plume forecast to avoid evacuation, which is murder in every sense of the word. And it shows up a lot of it might show up in rainfall. And then rain, of course, likes to run down to the coastline. And so a single bed of kelp was at 40 million atoms of iodine-131. Amount most likely was larger than that. And you can see the California State University. So this is not up for debate that it happened. It's simply not up for debate. The evidence is so overwhelming. And so we have been betrayed for 80 years, and we cannot allow that anymore. We just can't sit in silence anymore. We got no options. Well, our options is to start being vocal. This industry is falling apart, clearly. There's no nuclear renaissance. There's like 2 gigawatts this year, and they lost 5 gigawatts with plants closure. So they're gone backwards again this year. And there was 6, say a nuclear power plant is close to a gigawatt of power, which is enough to power 1 million homes and businesses. But in by the end of this year, they're expecting 660 gigawatts of just solar power, not counting other renewables, not counting wind, which is extraordinary. But just solar power was 660 gigawatts worldwide came online. The total capacity on the planet for gas, oil, and coal is around 4,800 gigawatts. So 600 gigawatts of renewables coming on in a 12-month period, expecting a growth of 40% next year. And total capacity of nuclear, by the way, is around 360 gigawatts worldwide. So solar power almost doubled the total capacity of nuclear over 80 years in just 12 months. And you can be guaranteed, take it to the bank, that solar power will double the total capacity of nuclear next year. And solar isn't the only renewable energy that's out there. And so the industry rate is, before it becomes before the population realizes that it's obsolete, among the many other horrific attributes, the nuclear industry is trying to just claw everything they can. Former Japan official, an unstoppable contamination of the Pacific Ocean. An unstoppable contamination of the Pacific Ocean is seriously menacing the U.S. West Coast. And that Fukushima is now undeniably a global security issue. And when he suggests that the wave of radiation will be 10 times more than the entire world's nuclear tests combined, it's way more than that. It's way more than that. Because a nuclear test is just a millionth of a second, right? These are meltdowns, burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. They're consuming steel and rock and rebar and cement and everything else. And then they're atomizing and aerosoling, ionizing and radiating that. And so these are perpetual emissions, 24 hours a day, on a scale that is unconscionable. But we also have a big issue that the world lives in denial, is that all the fuel pools worldwide have no containment. They're all still splitting the atoms they were for millions. Because each reactor core, so it works this way, each reactor core can power 1 million homes and businesses by boiling water, boils the water by splitting atoms. But what happens is after around 14 months, the fuel starts to become so fragile, they can't keep it in the reactor. So they take it out and they put it in the fuel pool. It still has those attributes. It's still producing the same amount of atoms as it would to boil water for 1 million homes and businesses. But the fuel pool now might have 8 of these reactor cores. So 8 million homes and businesses worth of atoms are being split every second. And that is released directly into the environment through the tall, skinny stacks. And it's averaging about 120,000 liters per fuel pool. Each liter is going to be saturated with the uranium, plutonium, americium, neptuniums, the strontiums, and the list is very long. And that is released directly into the atmosphere. And that's why every nuclear power plant is built in an area where it's surrounded by farms as far as the eyes can see. And the idea is to poison you. Let me give you an example. What I mean by that. Because we dug out a picture. I dug out a picture a few weeks ago, a month ago, or 2 months ago, who knows anymore. Because we have so much information. Up there is Sellafield in United Kingdom. Let me go backwards for a second. Let's get better pictures than that there. So when you do a satellite picture, this is from a satellite, and you look at that site over there in England, which is a nuclear site. It's like all nuclear plants. They're all surrounded by farms. And when you step back and look at it, how many people is that going to poison every day and every year? The numbers are just unbelievable. It's unbelievable what we're talking about. Because a lot of these farms are dairy farms for producing radioactive milk. Who drinks the most milk? School children and children, right? It is really sadistic and twisted and demented what they're doing. Radiation forecast were told by the government releasing it would cause what they said unnecessary panic. And the ministry decided such data would be unavailable due to a loss of power. So let's poison everybody so we can keep our jobs. That's the mentality of a child, right? And a bully child, a very dangerous child on top of that. A child with a mental illness. Even Canada, Calgary Sun. No need to panic, probably, about Fukushima fallout that rained on Canada. The government hasn't even released the data. This was a China syndrome where the whole site disappeared in a plume coming out of the ground. The ground was cracked in 6 places, and it was 10 sieverts per hour coming out of the steam coming out of the ground. This was the China syndrome. They have to abandon the site clearly, right? Nuclear scientists don't go to that site. There is nowhere safe on that site. Once these plumes come out again, everything is recontaminated. And these plumes are not just because you have the right conditions, you can see it. But that there's 6 places where the steam coming out of the ground is at lethal doses. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. Another interesting thing about this was that the Geiger counters are stationary Geiger counters, and they're maxed out at 10 sieverts. United States hit, and Canada, extremely large peaks large plumes, massive plumes of radioactive fallout. And we already kind of articulated some of that earlier. And Japan has no right, the nuclear industry has no right to do this to the planet. This was the model, France's model of the cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million atoms. And I'll let you know when it hits 20 days. You're at 20 days right there. That's 20 days of radioactive fallout at 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. And this stuff is never going to go away, because it's not just cesium-137. But for every cesium-137 produced, there's 100 times more strontium-90 produced. So multiply the 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air by 100. This is 2016. I was on the ocean doing research, and so when you see these types of headlines, they're typically based on my research. They're not using me, but they got nobody else. There's nobody else doing that research. I was out there for 4 to 5 months a year after year. The best years of my life, and I've suffered for it ever since. Historic crisis along the U.S. West Coast. We're facing a fishery disaster, very never seen before things. It should be an exclamation alarm to the public. An extinction threat for the salmon run. Loss of sardines, squid, sea urchins, kelp. It was an extinction event for the starfish. They were gone in 2016, as I documented. And marine mammals strandings. Let me bring up the poll for everybody. We still only got 20 likes, look. Wow. Been like that for almost an hour now. Got 26 votes. Should all nuclear university students work 1 year at Fukushima nuclear meltdowns to save Earth? Yeah, well, that's what they should be doing. You don't want to send in the homeless and the destitute like they've been doing for 13 years. That hasn't got us anywhere. And the nuclear students are just going to grow up and try to kill everybody anyway. Right? They're going to turn their back on you as soon as they graduate. They can't get a job unless they turn their back on you. Iodine in Pennsylvania rainwater samples is 100% above federal drinking water standards. See, like, they use iodine because the average person will look it up and say, well, it's gone in 8 days. And anybody who knows a little bit more will say, well, there's 10 half-lives, so it's gone in 80 days. But if you got one, then you got every single other one. They tell you iodine 131. That's a ploy meant to manipulate and deceive you and cause friction among your friends and families, because nobody can agree. And this is why we're here every day we can, to give you the documentation so you can extrapolate things on your own. You don't need to refer to them after. See, if you watch a dozen of these shows, you become very capable of extrapolating things on your own accurately. Because that's why they don't want you educated. Because you can figure it out on your own. Once you get enough information, you know what a lie is after that, in other words. And you know what the truth is. Fukushima Forecast shows cesium-137, iodine-131 over northwestern United States. And I'm sure at some point they're going to arrest me and just put me in jail and get rid of me. Because that's the only way to silence me. If they kill me, they'll make a murder, so to speak, out of me. So they can't do that. But if they arrest me and demonize me and vilify me, this is ultimately what they're going to do to me, right? I mean, they gave me gag orders for 3.5 years. They thought that would finish me off. They don't realize that this is the fuel for me, right? Every time you attack me, that's the best thing could happen. Because this is not a game. This is real. And this is the worst story conceivable on top of that. Everybody needs to be educated about this. We got no options. Only getting an informed population. Fukushima Forecast shows cesium-137, iodine-131 over northwestern United States on May the 5th. This is the Norwegian Institute for Air Research. The new type, this was another cesium-137 forecast, was this one right here. This was NOAA. I'm going to speed it up. This plume was based on 40 days of radioactive fallout. But it was based on a flawed numbers, right? They refused to acknowledge they were melted down. And same thing with the Norwegian Institute for Air Research. They refused to acknowledge that it was 100% meltdown. But as you start looking at the evidence, is iodine-131 killing babies in Philadelphia? Well, what else could be the catalyst? And deaths up 48% since radiation levels spiked in the tap water. And so they want you to believe it's just babies that are vulnerable, right? You see, there was 20,000 people in that same period died of heart attacks, extra, compared to any other year and month before. It was a spike in heart attacks. We've seen that also in Japan. Catastrophic. The numbers will give you the creeps, actually, right? Again, when you see them invoking, this is the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the furthest thing from a protection agency. Radioactive iodine-131 levels in PA and Pennsylvania, Massachusetts rainwater exceeded the maximum contaminated levels permitted in drinking water, which meant all the pipes were radioactive forever. It can't just be iodine-131. Right, so they didn't try to articulate it, and Forbes, of course, which is the most pro-nuclear as you get, this was the public relation firm in overdrive. Human embryos in the United States and Canada and Northern Hemisphere and Mexico are bioaccumulating radioactive isotopes, iodine, cesium, strontiums. It's interesting where very rarely you hear him talk about uranium, plutonium, isn't it? New Hampshire, Fukushima fallout, iodine again at 12,000 atoms per square meter in the sediment. So when you're only acknowledging iodines, you're probably one of the worst humans imaginable. The people that told that story and the journalists, the traitorous journalists that ran the story. A former Department of Energy official criticized a UC Berkeley professor for comparing ingestion of radioactive iodine to air travel. So when you get on a plane, you go up in the sky and you fly and you land, right? And you're out of the sky. When you get the radiation in your body, it's in your body pulsing energy every second for the rest of your life, wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA. How can you compare that? How can you conflate them together like that? It's a sickness to people that does this, but they've been doing this for 80 years, this narrative. Arkansas milk is above the maximum contaminated levels for iodine-131. Why would you use iodine-131? How can the reactors don't run on iodine-131? And the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel is going to be the curium isotopes, which need lead shielding 20 times thicker than it does for plutonium. And so for every one iodine-131, there's many, many, many more curium isotopes. Yeah, we worked hard to get our show tonight. I actually suffered to get our show up and running. That was torture. I'm starting to recover now, but it took a long time, didn't it? So the studies from, you guessed it, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, who said the effects of the radioactive fallout were beneficial. These studies they done on 144 beagle dogs in this particular study that inhaled plutonium. Tumors of the deaths started with 1.5 to 5.4 years after the exposures. And tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, the liver started about 3 years after exposures. Bone tumors in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death. Lung tumors and liver tumors. And they suggested the finding in the dogs suggests they all died, obviously. That similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in the humans. So the problem with that was that the human kidney are at least 50 times less efficient than the animal kidney at removing the plutonium, which means they're 50 times more vulnerable than the 144 dogs where every one of them died. And bone tumors, death by bone tumors, were the most common cause of death. That's a brutal way to die. My heart goes out to the victims' families that are out there. Now, the same Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico had done a study on curium isotopes, that are major byproducts in irradiated nuclear fuel. And just because they comprise a significant, which is really interesting to phrase it that way, by the way, they comprise a significant fraction of the alpha-emitting radionuclides, which is bad news as it gets, because you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, for the curium, which are the major byproducts in the irradiated nuclear fuel. And remember, that's 20 times worse than plutonium. Humans are 50 times less efficient than an animal at filtering it, and that all the animals died in all the studies of vicious tumors. And so they're also the same ones who said the victims in North America, Hawaii and North America, from the radiation would be a beneficial effect, but yet their study shows there is no benefit to it. And ignore the fact that they talk about alpha emitting. It's the major byproduct. That's what's really important about it. So it's the most plentiful isotope produced. Not iodine, not cesium. And they were pretty plentiful, weren't they? Not the xenon-133. All of these are brutal, by the way. But curium is your nightmare for all the species and for your friends and families and loved ones. Nuclear policy experts striking at the radioactive iodine-131 in California rainwater is so far above the levels permitted in the drinking water. Remember, every time you hear iodine, think of curium. And remember that all the dogs died in all the studies of vicious tumors, and how inefficient the human is at filtering compared to the animal. And so the idea of telling you iodine was to lie and manipulate and deceive you, but acknowledge that there was fallout, because you couldn't get away from that fact. But look at the lies. It's shocking. You know, New York Times contributor confirms the California rainwater was 181 times above drinking water standards for the radioactive iodine-131, which meant it was 1,000 times above for curium isotopes. Like the standards that they have for the iodine-131 damage is permanent, by the way, on top of that, right? So for the children's and the birds and the mammals and the animals and everything else, they're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their lives. But they're also going to be producing radioactive stem cells like the dogs were doing. That's why they died of bone tumors. And so when you start putting all this together, the study was updated to 14,000 deaths tied to Fukushima. That was heart attacks only that they showed. They showed there was a spike in the few weeks following it, right? Look at the numbers in Tokyo. 500 trillion atoms a kilogram of highly radioactive glass. These are hot particles. You get a single one in your body. Eventually, you're going to develop a serious tumor. But in the meantime, your body is under siege every second for the rest of your life from these explosions, from the decays. They call them decays, but they're actually explosions. So if you call it decay, it doesn't sound so bad, does it? If you call it an explosion every second, then you're actually accurate. It's really what they thought of everything, trust me. Officials admit a deadly Fukushima meltdown cover-up. TEPCO president lied about the meltdowns. It was a cover-up. It's a grave issue. It's an unprecedented nuclear disaster. It's as bad as it gets. And an unpardonable breach of trust. Well, the whole nuclear industry is the biggest breach of academic science in history, period. It's a total betrayal right across the board. Over 60 million Japanese irradiated by Fukushima. Nuclear experts, 50,000 square miles of Japan is highly contaminated. The rest of it is incredibly contaminated, by the way. Millions and millions need to be evacuated. More than 70% of the country is saturated with anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. Is uninhabitable. Radiation precautions for areas near Seattle, Vancouver, Portland. Perhaps you need to wash your shoes. Well, like, you throw your shoes away. You can't wash radiation away. You can't put it in your laundry. You'll contaminate the washer and everything else you ever put into it. Highly radioactive sewage. So, the sediment from the water filtration facilities is so radioactive they can't get rid of it. They used to use it for fertilizer, right? But the sediment from water filtration, because you're talking about filtering water for 1 million people, that makes a lot of sediment, believe it or not. So the sediment is so radioactive, shortly after they had 50,000 one-ton bags, not too far from Tokyo, of sediment from water filtration facilities they couldn't get rid of because it's too radioactive. They had similar amount of ash from the incinerators. It was so radioactive they couldn't get rid of it. And they had unimaginable amount of sewage that was dehydrated, by the way, which released a massive amount of the radiation back into the ecosystem. It was so radioactive they couldn't get rid of it. So the garbage is so radioactive you can't get rid of it. When you burn it, you liberate the majority of the isotopes back into the environment because you can't destroy it. And then the ash that's left over is so radioactive, legally you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of the sediment from your water filtration facilities, and you can't get rid of your sewage. What does that tell us, I wonder? Because they want to live in denial don't mean that's acceptable, and don't mean that we should allow that to happen. Don't mean that we don't have an obligation to speak out strongly and educate the population so this can be dealt with eventually. And it helps destroy the nuclear industry, right? Each one of these shows, as some policymaker, some investor is going to find the show and watch it. And they're going to go, oh crap, it's not like a banana. It's not like a potato chip. It's not like walking in the sunshine at all, is it? And they're going to have to rethink. Why would you invest in nuclear? You know you're going to lose it. And they will give the nuclear industry everything they want, and they still can't get it together. They've done that over and over and over everywhere around the planet, and they still can't get it together. They got to steal everything that's originally allocated, and then they need double that to finish the job. But this industry, entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty, deception, misrepresentation, and genocide and omnicides. Sharp rise in the iodine-131 levels, and I'm not laughing, it's an involuntary, it's like screaming, except I can't do that right now because we're trying to do a show, right? Sharp rise in iodine-131 levels at 3 Tokyo sewage plants. High levels of radioactive material found in Tokyo, 170,000 atoms a kilogram in the sewage. This is why there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, see? Everybody's contaminated. And cancer is not the only, not everybody's diagnosed, not everybody has health care, and cancer isn't the only thing. Iodine 131 levels rise 350 kilometers from Fukushima sewage plants. I mean, the incinerating radioactive material could contaminate the environment. This is Japanese media, who now refuse to acknowledge that it melted down as of last year. Along with, this was cooked up by the International Atomic Energy Agency, obviously, under Rafael Grossi's watch, but does that make it acceptable? The press watches as the government dumps radioactive waste into Tokyo Bay. There's so many of these headlines. Tokyo government unveils transport of incinerated radioactive sludge from the sewage plants. Incinerated radioactive sludge from the sewage. Radioactive sludge from sewage. These are not words that are supposed to go together. It's crazy. Nearly 5,000 nuclear plant workers, despite having paper suits on, suffering internal radiation exposures. Well, the filtration they're wearing can't filter radiation. Unless you can't filter air, see? You can't get... If air can go through the filter, then the filter can't work when it comes to radiation. Because the atoms are 600 times smaller than the filter is able to filter. And every atom is the same size, right? So you have to stop all atoms from going through the filter for the filter to protect you. It can't filter it. You can't filter radiation. That's why the ALP system, the REVA, the Siri system, the Curian system, filtration systems for water couldn't work and didn't work. Tokyo neighbor cesium approaching levels found in Fukushima. Chiba incinerator dust at 70,000 atoms a kilogram. At the same time as they were putting out this, France had an accident where they were packaging nuclear waste. They were packaging it at 1,700 becquerels a kilogram for long-term storage. Japan was feeding you 100,000 atoms, they said, but they simply weren't checking. And we know that because they're only acknowledging cesium. How can you have 10,000 atoms per square meter in North America from the French government study, but only have 100 in Japan at ground zero? They never stopped growing food in the nuclear wasteland. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste, 100 million atoms a kilogram to be incinerated, 1 billion pounds of radioactive debris in exclusion zones. They're grinding it up and bringing it to the prefectures, to the communities, and burning it in the local incinerators. And there was one incident where there was 3 workers had heart attacks on the same day. 300 times more radiation released into the atmosphere from burning the radioactive debris than claimed by the government. Every facet, like if this was anything else, it'd be funny, right? But we're talking about, this attacks everything with replicating cells. Local official, they found plutonium in every sample. It's everywhere. Of course it is. That's what the reactors, that's why there's a chain reaction, because they produce the plutonium over and over and over. Almost the entire city of 300,000 people has radiation levels high enough to get decontaminated by the government. But you can't get decontaminated from radiation. You can probably get a bit off, shave your head, shave your eyebrows, stuff like that. You know, give a strong shower for a couple hours. You can get some of it off you, but you're only going to get a fraction off you. And you can't get any of it out of you. And if you got that much on you, you got significant, very harmful amounts inside. It's so bad that they got to chop down the forests because every gust of wind, cesium, uranium, plutonium, americium, plutonium, strontium particles are showering the whole village. U.S. bans agricultural fishery products from 14 prefectures. Well, the whole world did. 55 countries banned it. Anybody who was dealing with Japan banned the food from Japan, except for Canada. So all the most radioactive stuff was sent to Canada. Now Canada is perpetual illnesses and diseases. We have Fukushima polluting the entire Pacific Ocean, and we're talking about how people should be dressed. New York Times. We have Fukushima polluting the entire Pacific Ocean, and we're talking about how people... There was dissenting voices. Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan starting April the 6th. People should stay home or immediately take off their clothes and cleanse the nuclear contaminants. But what it is you throw your clothes away. You can't and your shoes. You can't reuse that stuff. You can't put that in your washing machine. You'll contaminate everything. Else you put in there forever. And so in time of cleansing the nuclear contaminants, throw away your clothes and get in the shower and stay there all day. Try to get some... Like my advice if you go there is to immediately shave your head and your eyebrows. Don't bring any clothing into your hotel room. If you do, just stop at the door, throw it in a garbage bag and put it outside your door right away. Go right in the shower, stay there for 5 hours. And then rain caused 130 schools in South Korea to close. So you had Taiwan told people to stay home, and 130 schools at the very beginning of it were closed. Yet this particular administration today refuses to acknowledge that happened. Same thing with Taiwan. Taiwan, leading director in Japan, nuclear power generation is the only invention that may destroy the future of humans. Major U.S. power trying to quit nuclear power altogether threatens the very existence of human civilization as we know it. Miko Kaku, a physicist from California, I believe, human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima. Liquefaction of 3 nuclear reactor cores, and the first time any core ever liquefied. It was actually 4, and it could have been the common spent fuel pool and reactor 6 as far as we know. Nobel Prize winner on NHK, the only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. EU Energy Commissioner called Fukushima an apocalypse and that everything was out of control. That's still true today. We are being denied a future. France says Japan has lost control. French should leave the country. Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. Tokyo lost almost all control of events at Fukushima. So there was dissenting voices, but the problem was they were ostracized, right? You had the main media worldwide going there pretending that they're in a building that doesn't exist. And the evidence that the buildings blew up was everywhere. The fuel pools were at the top of the buildings, but yet they're claiming they're in the building. Claiming they're in a building getting fuel out of a pool. So I think we hit our 2-hour limit, did we? Oh yeah, we hit that. That was kind of hard to do though, wasn't it? It was really awkward for the first hour. And we finally got it together. Okay, so let's come in and close the poll, I guess. That's all we got left to do now, is it? Looks like we got butchered on our numbers too tonight. They weren't expecting me to get back online, I would imagine. I guess tomorrow's going to be a shit day for me, is it? The most important story in human history. We got 17 wonderful viewers. We got 24 likes, 27 votes. Should all nuclear university students work for 1 year at Fukushima? Clearly the homeless and destitute can't do the job. So why shouldn't they work there? They're going to turn around and try to kill you once they graduate anyway. To save Earth. Yes, I mean that would be the moral and ethical. That's what you would expect to happen. Send in the youngest, the brightest. Instead of the old sawhorses that are censoring us right now as we speak. James sent the PayPal. Bless your heart, James. I feel like my... well, it'll be better tomorrow night because I'm going to spend a bunch of hours. I got 5, 6, 7 hours to punch in tomorrow to get things back up and running. I'm going to have a couple of backup sessions in case they do it to me again. I mean, after all these years, they should realize I don't know how to give up. I just don't know how to do it. It's never going to happen, no matter what. And catch everybody more like, because I'm in that mode right now where I'll just talk on and on and on. I'm not going to do it. Thank you, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Thanks for calling in too, James. My goodness, that helped. That definitely got us back. Because it was a whole half an hour. Normally I can get back online in 6 minutes when I get screwed over, right? A half an hour is extraordinary for us. Everybody knows that. We still punched in a 2-hour show. We still got Calm Down Charlie song. I got that. That's still ready to go. And that's the song. Check out James Luce's site, folks. He's got more music. Download it and put it on your kid's phone so they're listening to it. Don't give them any allowance till they can sing the words of at least one song. That's a pretty nasty thing to say, you know. But that's what we should be doing, right? We need more people that are out there doing this. Okay, I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. Bless your heart if you did. Take care, folks.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford's show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.